Here we are. We're on the Sure Oak podcast, and I have a very, very special guest, longtime friend, Kevin Groves. Kevin, first, how are you? I don't know. I feel like I tricked you into doing this. Are you are you good being on the cast?
Anything for you, my friend.
Hey, how do I get out of a rear naked choke? And his answer was, well, don't get in a rear naked choke. It's too late.
Doesn't sound pleasant.
In terms of like credibility, like, is there a credibility crisis? Exponential digital transformation happening. And along with the exponential digital transformation, there's exponential demand by boardrooms and C-suites that trickles down to the line. And the line is implementing as fast as they can, but by human capacity, it's a linear adoption. And there's this disconnect. What is dignity? Why is it important? And what is this disconnect that we're seeing? What is happening?
So this inherent self-worth and respect, we've defined along 3 dimensions. One is, having a sense of the work that I do is significant. The second is respect. And the last one is this idea of connectedness. And I know we'll talk about some practical strategies to get there. That's all I got, man. That's all.
I love it.
That's all I got for
it. I love it. All right. Let's get into it. So, okay. So here we are. We're on the Sure Oak podcast, and I have a very, very special guest, longtime friend, Kevin Groves. Kevin, first, how are you? I don't know. I feel like I tricked you into doing this. Are you are you good being on the cast?
Anything for you, my friend. No, pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. An opportunity to spend a few minutes or longer with you. I say yes to. Default yes.
All right, I'm going to give you an introduction. You can correct me, but well, first, as background, I've known you since 1997. Like, you're like one of my oldest, dearest friends. And the day I met you, I was like, who is this tall guy, Division I basketball player? I hate him already.
Until you saw me play.
No, but it's, well, you have obviously, just to give you a little background, Dr. Kevin Groves, PhD, you are a professor of organizational and theory management at Pepperdine University at the Grazi Audio Business School. And, when you really got at, postdoc, you really got into succession planning, leadership bench strength, cultivating that research, and you did really well at it. But then recently I'm on your email list, and I saw you did this really cool piece in the Journal of Organizational Dynamics, and it was entitled "Cultivating the Experience of Dignity at Work During Digital Transformation: Protective and Proactive Strategies for Leaders and Organizations." So, one, anything I missed on your intro that the crowd should know about, but two, what was the genesis of this research? What were you seeing? And maybe you could tell a little bit about your practice areas, the clients that you work with, and what generated this research interest.
Sure. Great introduction. Appreciate the background, and a nice blast to memory lane. Thinking of those days when we first met. Perfect job. My role at the Grazi Audio School, I primarily teach in our executive programs. We have EDBA, Doctorate of Business Administration, full part-time MBA. So in terms of our portfolio, I primarily work with our executive students. And most of my research and consulting interests are in the areas of executive talent management. You referenced a lot of my earlier foundational work was essentially trying to help organizations make better decisions around assessing for advancement potential, getting smarter about succession planning tools, using analytics, predictive analytics, to try to understand where people are likely to be best positioned in the future to help drive the business. The sort of transition point for a lot of scholars and consultants in this space is the ubiquitous changes happening to organizations and their strategies vis-a-vis all types of digital tools. And I'd say maybe 10 years ago, this started with, clients trying to understand, we're designing these in-house executive development, succession planning programs and practices. We're investing heavily in them. And usually that is in partnership with, strategically, here's where we're going with the business. We're making a transformation to becoming a platform company. for example. And
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
involves having to think differently about what kind of talent is likely to be successful in that space. And these are
Mhm.
mostly mid to senior level leadership team members, directors, executive directors making the transition into the C suite. And that's usually where there's much of the tension around how do we actually execute a digitization initiative, puts tremendous pressure on those essentially having to navigate both driving strategy and in the mix of their own teams, so, across the enterprise. So that was a big turning point, again, for me and for others in this space. And we began to see, some of the executive skills and capabilities that you need are somewhat similar to what we would expect in any change effort, but some of it is
Okay.
also quite new. What is unique about digital technologies replacing the cognitive human element of the work and how it's done? That is something new that we have to think differently about. So that I would say is a bit of the starting point for a bit of a redirection on executive development, talent management in the context of digital transformations.
Yeah, and you work with some, like, I know you've worked with Kaiser, Mayo, a lot of large, healthcare. I'm not as familiar with some of the other enterprises you've worked with. I know they're large. But what we're seeing at SureOak, and we've talked about this on other podcasts, is there's exponential digital transformation happening. And along with the exponential digital transformation, there's exponential demand by boardrooms and C-suites that trickles down to the line. And the line is implementing as fast as they can, but, by human capacity, it's a linear adoption, and there's this disconnect. And so when you did this research paper about protecting dignity, and you might use proxy words like culture, uh, worth, maybe you could just define what the impact of that disconnect between C-suite down to the line within an organization. There is a lot of risk around dignity. And so maybe you could unpack dignity because you break it out into two different components within the paper itself. But like, what is dignity? Why is it important? And what is this disconnect that we're seeing? What is happening that's negative?
Yeah, really important foundational part of the work that we've conducted, and this is certainly evolving. What we've shared, we have all kinds of projects, research, and client-based projects up and running. But the experience of dignity at work is inherently the self worth and respect that employees across the organization are endowed either inherently as human beings that deserve respect and dignity in
Mhm.
parts of the organization, and earned, whereby your job performance, how you interact with others, sort of elicits a response of, "Here's how we want to better support you as a member of the team." And so, this inherent self worth and respect we've defined along three dimensions. One is, having a sense of the work that I do is significant. We describe it
Mm.
as this significant nexus. Organizations can do things to either rob people of their sense of the work that I do matters, or they can help support that and position them for success. And I know we'll probably talk about some practical strategies to get there. The second is respect, a sense of as the organization, the enterprise is making big decisions on where we're going. We're making this
Mm.
leap to become a platform based company. Am I involved? Is my voice matter, even if I'm not a
Mm.
matter expert? So that sense of respect, again, can either be nurtured or it can be taken away, from the experience. And the last one is this idea of connectedness. That is, as a member of the team, there's a sense of perhaps a sense of isolation, feeling left behind. I'm a
Yes.
part of the organization that isn't the high growth, and do I feel maybe kind of the train is leaving and I'm left out. And so that's another opportunity to say, yeah, you may not be driving, the digitization effort, or may have, specific expertise, but you're a part of the enterprise in some way. And so that becomes another opportunity for organizations to think very clearly, how do we ensure people feel included? So those are, three big areas. The one context I would share, and this has been examined for decades, and that is, the sort of experience for anyone of, do I want to get on board with this new digitization effort? It's often, you can think of it along two dimensions. I either believe it is good for our business, and I think it's substantively going to help us create new value. That's one dimension. And the other is a sense of efficacy or confidence. Do I believe I have the aptitude, the skills to learn these new technologies? And so, from a
Yeah.
C-suite perspective, that's often I've found in working with clients a good starting point. Think of your workforce along those two axes: belief in the tool itself or the digitization effort, and their sense of efficacy, confidence. I can be successful here, and that can be very helpful for them making investments in how do we avoid this disconnect that you referenced.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So a couple questions on top of that. The transformation, I mean, I feel like with AI particularly, Dario Amodei has talked about, we could wipe out up to 50% of white collar jobs, really dramatic statistics coming out of some of these AI companies. I think you reference a McKinsey study in there as well, in your paper. One of the things I want to ask you about is leadership's trust, right? So, like, there is this dialogue happening. Our jobs are going to be taken away. There is this position leadership immediately takes. No, we're going to be fine. We're protected. But sometimes there's like this vacuum of information. It's like, well, we don't quite have a strategy mapped out yet. We don't know where we're going with that. I'm imagine there's some credibility leadership has to earn. Like, it's probably too late. Like, I did jujitsu for a while, and we met with this master professor. We said, like, "Hey, how do I get out of a rear naked choke?" And his answer was, "Well, don't get in a rear naked choke. It's too late.
It doesn't
It's
sound
too late."
pleasant.
No, it's
I'm
not.
imagining
The
what that
idea
looks
that
like.
there was 12 steps before the rear naked choke that you should have been aware of before you got there. So, like, in terms of like credibility, like, is there a credibility crisis too with leadership that you see in terms of, hey, we're going to say this, there's this dialogue happening, we uh, don't control the narrative, be more, what would you call, authentic and clear to your teams about what is actually the reality. I wonder, I mean, it's harder said than done in enterprise, but I was wondering, it's a long-winded question, but like, could you talk about trust and like how that is controlled?
Yeah. Yeah, I think your use of the term authentic, an authentic response, clear messaging, consistent messaging is really important. And, two examples that are competitors we see very, very recently, you compare what's happened, with Amazon, since 2022 in the sort of messaging on, massive workforce reductions, about
Mm,
10% of their global workforce, approximately 57,000 employees, positions rather, they've eliminated, perhaps not with the degree of where is this going as a business? How does this fit into where we are? So the sense of a consistent, messaging and authentic response. What's the strategy? Juxtapose that to Walmart, largest private employer in the world, about 2 million employees. The recently, just last month, departed CEO McMillan, made a really strong investment in the workforce, largest private workforce in the world. One with a massive increase in wages, significant increase in wages
mm,
for their retail stores and distribution centers. This was in 2015, which laid the foundation for what's happening now. Just announced, rather than engage in these massive reductions or significant reductions in the workforce, the commitment is we're going to keep the workforce levels flat, and we're going to make investments in AI development. And it's essentially a partnership with Google, where all employees across the Walmart network have an opportunity to complete essentially a certification training.
mm.
How might AI tools help me with my role? So the authenticity of why are we doing this now? What does AI mean for me? Whether I'm in a distribution center or a corporate role or in a retail environment, there's an explicit commitment to we want to help build where you could go, and that's very aligned with some of the findings that we proposed in our research. And this was obviously from both what we observe in media, business media, but clients that we work with. Making those kinds of workforce investments does provide this platform of authenticity. So one of the recommendations specifically we make is around job crafting. That yeah,
Mm.
60 upward 70% of knowledge worker roles are going to change because of what AI tools can provide. But does that provide an opportunity for employers to create new positions that are essentially aligned to how do my most talented, upwardly mobile part of the workforce, how are they using these tools in a way that can create new value, essentially creating new positions? So that's a clear recommendation that we've advocated. What we see with Walmart right now is a good example of that. They're creating the foundation for new and different positions and new value creation, and we'll see. They're doing quite well to date. As again, it's kind of an illustrative case as a massive employer.
Yeah, and there's some solutions themes that you have, like practical things leaders can do. But before I get there, I did want to follow up. There is, I don't know if it's surprising to you, and this might be a dumb question, but there is this redefinition of what the enterprise is. What is it to be human and what is it to be an enterprise? Are we for profit? So is it the game is to do as much digital transformation and replace headcount and be the most profitable, implementing every technology possible? I feel like there are some the Jack Dorsey story at Square where he laid off an absurd a number of employees at his organization because I don't need them. This is what the future is. It's this agent driven AI company. Um, but I feel like the enlightened CEOs or the enlightened, they're like, well, it's going to be human plus AI that's going to be the game changer, and that's where I need to make my investments. But like, is that going on? Is there a redefinition of like, what are we dedicated to shareholder value? Are we dedicated to the human experience? Are those conversations happening? With your clients?
Yeah, I think explicitly, Walmart's one example. Their idea of being people first, technology driven and led. That's a very consistent messaging, and you see it in their policies. And so there's sort of at least from the as a an observer, a clear message. I would say we see that with the organizations that we work with that are driving just as disruptive potentially technologies within roles. For example, electronics distribution company, global scale, have a presence in most parts of the world, and it's an organization we've worked with for some time, and they have a similar challenge in trying to ensure there's a what is the inherently human value that our workforce provides and the work that we do, and how can that be augmented? So a quick example would be, or a few examples. One is design thinking. Where do creative ideas come from? What's the process that we use to ensure ideation and real creativity can exist? And the starting point becomes putting the humans, our team members, at the center of that process. And then what are the generative or other AI or other digital tools that can help accelerate a design thinking contribution to the business? A lot of examples in industry. Netflix feature where you have multiple profiles is one that was a result of design thinking. How can we improve the
Mm.
user experience? And there's certainly many others. We've observed that in the work that we do. But the key, I think, is the consistency of, are we starting with the human activities at the center of the enterprise that we can augment? Creativity, design thinking is one. Another is roles and exchanges that are characterized by high emotional labor and emotional management. So if you think
Mm.
in the case of anything customer service driven, the interface between stakeholders internally and consumers, and clearly within the work internally within work teams, those sort of emotionally charged interactions where you need humanity, the ability to decode nonverbal messages, to work through uncertainty and really tough decision making, dynamic decision making. That's where we see another humanity first. How can that be augmented by these numerous tools that we have at our disposal now?
Oh, that's so good. So, because one of the things in your paper you reference is the identification of high potential people, and then really relying on personnel assessments to find these people like the Netflix that have the ability to think outside the box, use the tools creatively to push the organization forward. I imagine not everyone falls into that category. So we don't want to go as draconian as the old Jack Welch differentiation. Let's get rid of 10% of the herd every year. But there is this idea of self-selecting into this culture of innovation. We're going to see more of that. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's more than fair in that there is a range, a spectrum of how organizations might be thinking who is best suited, equipped because of individual differences, personality, profile dimensions, or if they are using rigorous assessments, how can we be more thoughtful and more transparent and fair? The idea of, I may not be known to have a technology background, but maybe I do have the sort of thick skin resilience where I
Yeah.
could learn these tools and be quite
Yeah.
effective. So, in both of those cases, there's a good value to pursue that kind of strategy. But I think you're right. The base rate, the more typical profile is organizations, management teams tend to lean more into their, intuition sense of the workforce and who's likely to be successful, as opposed to leaning into how can we more rigorously assess for likelihood of being successful in these new roles. That's certainly something we work with organizations on a lot. It's in the form of talent review, succession planning, cycles, but to lean a bit more into how can we rigorously assess for potential for success in this very different world that we're it's evolving as we speak, right? These roles are quite dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of competitiveness, I mean, it is so important. I mean, I know we talk about preserving everyone's dignity, but like there is certain values that your organization holds dear. And there are certain standards that you hold dear. And that is a part of your personnel process. That is part of your hiring process, not who comes in. And what I've noticed, I mean, Sure Oak certainly isn't a publicly traded company. We're not that big. But we did go through this value process, and it took, gosh, Kevin, this is probably not surprising to you, but it took 18 months to land on these are the values. This is how we measure. This is what we reward, and this is what we don't tolerate. And what I noticed was, instead of having to tell people to go, they were self-selecting out. Like, this isn't for me. Like, I get where you're going. I think there was some dignity in that. There was like, I respect you all. I respect what you're doing. It's just not for me. I'm going to go elsewhere. But others who were bought in is like, oh, I have now opportunity. This aligns with me. This is where I want to go. I feel a little bit that's what you're touching on. That's what these tools do. It helps you be more competitive because you are reinforcing a standard and a value.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I think and the values and that is heavy lifting, hard work for not just for large organizations, but across the spectrum. If you're trying to define or reaffirm, here's what's most important to us as from the board level, the executive team, that 18-month runway is not surprising at all. But those are exactly the values you should see embedded in all kinds of talent related decisions, not just succession planning, talent review, but talent acquisition.
Mm,
We're trying to grow in a smart way, but also how we navigate these really difficult decisions. One, and it gets maybe to the heart of dignity, what a lot of employees are facing now is when there is need for workforce reductions, for essentially eliminating positions because of efficiencies. That is one of those windows where it's really quite clear, are our values embedded in the process that we
mm,
use? One of the recommendations that we make and in observing organizations that do this well is being very thoughtful in how do we ensure as we're evolving with technologies that again are presenting efficiencies, are we doing it in a way that does respect the dignity of everyone engaged? And that could lead to, as you're rightly suggesting, there are other opportunities either within the organization, the enterprise, or elsewhere. And because they've been thoughtfully engaged in things like strategic planning, town hall sessions, trying to ideate how might we not perhaps have to lead to reduce
mm.
positions, but rather new opportunities. The more that you can be thoughtfully engaged, that is reflective of values. We're transparent. We respect the contributions that everyone makes, and there may be other opportunities to pursue. And I think for any organization, that's the impression you want to
Mm.
cultivate, regardless of whether they remain or maybe have to pursue opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, let's get into more. You mentioned town halls. So when I'm reading this, I'm going to boil it down. You probably hate me for doing this. This is the way I always am. I take a mental shortcut, but like all your solutions were around two critical themes for me. One was training and upskilling, and the other was communication. And so maybe start at the communication layer. You mentioned town halls and engagement. Why can those be powerful? I know from Sure Oak, I was very worried about the team not being engaged enough with the AI topic. So we started doing what I call book clubs. They weren't anything about books, but like for a 6-week period, someone would moderate latest, greatest stories in AI just to get them talking about it. I thought it was really helpful. I don't think that's a town hall, maybe exactly as you're talking about, but getting people out of whatever, just looking at management talk. What we call it in church, get people out of pews and into circles, like get them into small groups of 6 to 8 talking. Um, I mean, is that what we're talking about in terms of this engagement? Is
Yes.
what is working there on the communication and on the training side?
Yeah. Yeah. We start with the former. It can either be in a more formalized way. Almost always it's a strategic planning cycle. We're engaging relevant stakeholders in as broad as you can make it. Typically that's manager, director, and above. We want them involved in the decisions that we're making on how we are leveraging these technology tools to help drive our business. And so that's maybe a formal example. The advice we always give, and we facilitate a lot of these sessions, is be broad based. It shouldn't just be the members of the board, the executive team that are driving, strategic goals, but rather how is that going to affect the broader base of the organization. So that's a formal part, but others maybe more around experimentation. You're providing opportunities. Where might we ideate and kind of experiment? It's like design thinking within the organization. And we do have some process to report back. I've tried using this generative AI tool, and I found real success in parts of my
Yeah.
role, and others it is not. It's actually gone against the kind of customer reactions that we want because, and there's actually research to support this, employees having to exaggerate the humanity and emotional content to offset what the tool provides in the case of a kind of a customer service experience. So that's kind of two pathways that are trying to include multiple voices. And I think the hesitancy a lot of executive teams have is we don't want to send the message that a doomsday scenario. We have this
Yes.
this tool that's coming and it's going to create a sense of panic and or inadvertently chase employees out. It's more by way of what does this mean for me? There should be a thoughtful way to be transparent, to engage people, but not in a way that maybe sends that sort of message. It's being inclusive, and you're helping people shape where the organization is going.
Mm.
One of the best examples of this, it's one that the folks watching this probably have heard. Netflix does an incredible job on a quarterly basis before each of their earnings calls. They bring everyone together in the same room, director level and above. So it's somewhere 300 plus leaders in the organization, all the way up to Reed Hastings. And the idea is to both communicate, here's the earnings that we're about to hear publicly in 2 weeks, but more so it's about what are all these generative ideas that we're proposing? They
Mm.
call them bets in the
Mm.
Netflix world. And
Mm.
we want some shared understanding of that and how we should be sourcing them. So it becomes it's strategic planning, but it's really how can we support and resource the kind of projects that are coming bottom up? I mean, these are our director level, so mid to senior management level people that are involved. So it's a big resource investment, but it's the same idea that we're talking about. They're driving in part where the firm is going, as opposed to being told. So that's one I think important element of dignity that we're describing. They walk out of there with
Yeah.
a real sense of significance, feeling valued and connected. to their colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta imagine that's a little messy too, right? Because of some places, because I imagine the larger your organization gets, the more dignity is at risk, because I don't really know where it's like the blind spots. I don't know where dignity is missing in certain parts of my organization. I'm imagine for Netflix when they put out, "Here's stuff we're thinking about," it's a little like social media. It's like, that could cause, like, unintended, chatter or rumors and people, but I imagine they're not afraid of that feedback. I imagine there's a little bit of that's planned chaos on their ends. Like, I wanna get that feedback. I wanna hear some things we weren't thinking about as leadership when we were considering some of these initiatives.
Yeah, no, I think it comes back to the earlier discussion around values, and Hastings and Sarandos and others. They're very explicit about this. We have the benefit of operating in an environment where we can make big bets, mistakes, and they don't go well. And we're not in a healthcare environment or an environment
Mhm.
where mistakes have real consequences. So it is embedded in the culture. The kind of the fail fast, fail first has been around for
Yeah,
a
yeah.
time, but it has to be validated. And yeah, we're willing to share when things don't go well, and we don't have a sense of punishing failure, but rather discipline learning, after action review type conversation. So that's where leadership and role modeling become really really important.
Yeah, I love that. I guess what is it? The Jim Collins shoot your bullets before your cannonballs. I even heard a better one. This was the Jeff Bezos. Is this a two-door decision or a one-door decision? Like, if we go through this door, is there any getting back out of it? I imagine that most of these new initiatives are two-door decisions that
Yes.
they can execute on pretty quickly. If we make a mistake, there's an exit door and we don't cost ourselves a lot of money or hurt the brand too much. But if it's a one-door decision, let's escalate. Let's talk. We need to spend. Jeff's idea was you're not spending enough time on your one door decision, but you're spending way too much time on your two door decisions. And so I think that's really critical. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, Ben Horowitz, the founder of A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, he talks about in his book, I think it was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. He says leaders on his team, it was required that they would spend 30% of their allotted time of their work time training. Is that sometimes I'm like, I can't even think about that 3%, but do you think like this idea of upskilling, having your senior leadership teams pushing down more training, that's got to be critical in this moment right now?
Yeah, I think it on two ends or two spectrum. One, it is the personal, edification, continuous learning. The example you gave earlier around the kind of book forum where you're engaging people in new learning and having others, involved in, tell me how we can learn from this. That's important, just given in a knowledge worker environment where your contribution is human capital, ideas, analysis, thinking.
Yeah.
At least for the kinds of organizations, enterprises we're describing here, that becomes really important to understand how do these tools help our role. That's critical. But two, the other spectrum is the role modeling effect on your team members. The idea, if you personally in a leadership role across levels, making that investment. I'm looking to improve my understanding of how I can deliver more value in my role. That has really powerful role modeling effect on the team, and that's where you see these investments. For the highest performing organizations that we work with, and we do benchmarking data. You have I spend 20 to 30% of my time on training and or engagement of my team members. I'm actively involved in that process, and that could be, I'm a executive sponsor of a part of the internal leadership academy, executive development programming. I make that a priority. It could be I singularly mentor several individuals in the organization, helping them grow their career. But I think it's related to your question. It's of the time that I have, part of that is on my own personal growth and development, but I'm investing in that in my team and the workforce in various training investments. That's a real predictor we see in the higher performing organizations in this context.
Eh, Gosh, I mean, I feel like that's almost an inherent human trait that these leaders would want to do that. But I guess it could be a taught skill too. or I guess it would be one of those self-select or select them out of the organization if they aren't committing to that type of work. That's really interesting. One of the things I did ask you about, because I know you even did some work with Towers Parent, you've been doing strategic planning, and now you're on the human side. I would imagine our audience is largely chief marketing officers, and what we're seeing is a very hard time in this current market to do proper strategic planning. You certainly can't do 5-year anymore, can barely do 3-month, maybe I could do 6-month. With that being so fluid, is there more advice that you would have around the communication about, like, keeping the authenticity? Is it just like what we were talking about with Netflix is like, here's the questions we're asking. We don't have all the answers. What is your advice on this fluid market where we're seeing new release after new release of new LLM and the open claw update and the agentic age is happening? I mean, it's very fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the same discipline that all organizations want around strategic planning. How do we see our operating environment differently? Are we understanding industry dynamics in a way that, has shifted, and we need to better understand how our own capabilities are positioned for success in where we compete. That discipline, it sort of should be kind of a doubling down. How can we be more frequent in terms of when we come together, more broad based, the number of stakeholders that we
Yeah.
which always a pain point is how much more work and contributions you're asking of people, right? They're maintaining their role and they're a part of, the strategic planning cycle.
Yeah.
Important.
Yeah.
But I think to your question on the timing, the, quarterly reviews and updating that is largely on the how have our experiments, the progress that we've made on various initiatives, which are not the one-way door examples. They're more, we're kind of testing. We're trying to get a sense of has this new tool iteration, part of our process, has it worked, and how can we share that with the broader organization? And that's very it's potentially time intensive, but time well spent in the conversations that happen in those sessions, because there is the opportunity to, you know, not have a shared understanding of we're trying these new LLMs and or new digital tools. We might be having pockets of success here, and maybe it's not working elsewhere. There does run the risk, particularly for larger organizations, the sort of innuendo or stories of how it's
Yeah.
working outstrips the reality. A lot of your listeners and clients, I would imagine, remember the MIT report. It was published last fall. It was very it had quite an impact on the markets and community. And it was essentially what you're describing, the sort of the reality of who's using these AI tools internally versus the value that they have in terms of their
Yeah.
roles. There's this quite a disconnect. So all the more reason for more frequent, more broad based, and largely on the how do we share successes, failures on these kind of experiments, internal trials that we're running. That we found is really effective.
More frequent, more broad base. I love the broad base because so much of like with the conversations we'll have is the board is forcing this conversation, almost this forced march of implementation of these tools without really any bottom up. Hey, we haven't really played with that, or I'm on this lockdown Microsoft suite. Only thing I've ever seen AI related is Copilot. Don't even ask me what Claude or OpenClaw is, or like these new tools that are impacting our business or has the potential to impact our business. And again, like I think this is the other crazy thing. Like AI adoption's only like at 5% worldwide, but like here we sit in the US, we're freaking out. Like, am I the last one to do this? This one. And so there is this overreaction by boards and C-suites for sure. I think some time, like you said, is more frequent discussions, more like who do we know? Who should be in this conversation? And I'm sure the hard part for large organizations is how do we synthesize this data and bring it up? How do we make this actionable so that these are rich decision making processes? I'm assuming, like again, the Jeff Bezos memos and consolidating this information so that we do have better conversations. I think we'll see a lot more of this discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, and that the pressure for boards and executive teams in the investment and feeling left behind, that's certainly played out. The reputational, if we're not making these investments, what does it say about our business?
Yeah.
But there's a very, and that's at the heart of strategic planning. You're trying to marry the tools and the opportunities, technology and otherwise, that are presented in our industry and our environment. You're marrying that with internal capabilities, core competencies. What do we do well as a firm? What part of our talent base is well positioned and not well positioned for where we're going. So there the all in, or a sense of we have to replicate what our competitors are doing. uh, it should be more of, this is the bet, this is the investment we're making, and there's nothing wrong with having a more progressive, kind of experimental approach, which a lot of organizations do. It's part of the strategic initiatives that come out of a strategic planning session, but it's not all of them, right? So that's an approach we found worked well.
Yeah, I think strategic planning is one of those. The organization needs a lot of reps at it. That was, a strategic plan that sat on a shelf, or like, oh, we didn't set good goals, or we didn't identify blockers, or we didn't use six forces correctly, things like that, like back to these fundamental things. But I think, strategic planning is so important right now, and smart bets and having theories and testing and retesting and using tools. I think that is so important. Anything else that you're seeing out there in terms of like, hey, this is something that's coming, I want everyone to know about, or here's, you know, in terms of challenges your clients are having, make people feel not so alone, Kevin?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great, a great question on just the reality that, the issues that we've described today, had a little bit of time with, is um, fairly ubiquitous, in terms of feeling not sure, but I'm in a mode of trying. There's maybe experimentation might be the word. I do think, new and emergent, it is more of a, and maybe this is part of the correction. We've seen this with some of the organizations we work with, trying to be more human, employee centered in the investments that we're making in these tools, as opposed to, there is a new Claude version and it has this capability and might provide some value in, there are software as a service as an outcome. What in a context, rather, what is it about our internal human capabilities? This is what we do particularly well, and we're trying to augment that thoughtfully among a range of options. So, again, human centered might maybe design thinking, creativity. It may be, here's the uniquely human contribution we make to, our consumers,
Mm,
our markets, and we're starting with that perspective. And then it's maybe a kind of a reimagining of, where is there a community sort of social, cost and or responsibility that we want to commit to. That doesn't mean all jobs, all roles are preserved, but rather, do we, as an organization, do we see ourselves as embedded in our communities, in society? And that also, it's human centered, but it also is maybe a uh, a flashback to sort of, what does it mean to be a responsible employer in the age of AI, this
yeah.
industrial revolution. So that's something we've seen, and there's certainly a lot of examples, both, uh, uh, I would say irresponsible, recently, and then
Yeah.
more responsible just in the last year or two.
I think that's so good because there's an element of, to be human, is to be human can be pessimistic or optimistic, right? And I think to be human in this scenario for leaders, I think it's always good to err on the optimistic side, because I'm giving you these tools to free up the mundane so we can do more design thinking, so we can be more innovative. And I get it. There are some people, I signed up here to be a lever puller. I only want to be a lever puller. I don't know. Like, I feel those will be the ones, sadly, they're going to get left behind. But in my experience, people want, like, just like you said at the beginning, they want to contribute and they want to be treated well, right? If I can give them both of those things, and I think AI can do that in spades, right? Like, we can actually give people more capacity. Here, use this copilot, use this agent. Let's automate that stuff so that you can, like, think of new ways to to make the business grow on top of that. And like, and don't be afraid of your job. I mean, I hate the stories of like, I automated myself. I got myself fired because I was so good at using the tools. Like, well, come work for Sure Oak. I would love to.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah, sounds like quite a profile of a colleague you would want. Yeah, I think the core message, and you articulated it really, really well. If you're starting from the position, our workforce, our colleagues, people that we care about, irrespective of where they might go and how, with us or elsewhere, we want them to have the experience of feeling significant. Their work matters. That they are engaged in meaningful work, whatever that may be. They're respected by their colleagues. So as the organization's making decisions that impact them, there's a sense that they're included, and then a feeling of connectedness. And that is,
Mm,
as the world changes quickly, there's lots of advantages to ensuring people feel I have good connections, both internal and external to the organization in networks, and I have this sort of support and landing spot. In the scenario you described, uh,
mm,
I don't prefer the kind of work that this new AI enabled world looks like, but I do want to have a sense of where to go next. That starting point can really shape. Here are the tools we want to invest in. Here's how it's going to help our business, and the new positions that it will create, like the job crafting. These are new and high impact roles. Again, back to the Walmart example, they've been
mm.
pretty explicit about that. Creates a lot of opportunities for our associates who have been with us, from the ground up in our retailer center. So that's the optimistic, that's the positive side. It's boy, the kind of contribution you can make, technology enabled, AI enabled, is
Yeah.
is the sort of the optimism I think that is also top of mind.
This is a question I've always wanted to ask you. So, as like a really important professor now at Pepperdine University, like, do you ever show Office Space to your classroom of like the TV show? Like,
Ah,
because I want to give it. If that's on TBS, I will stop and watch it because I think that is the funniest movie of like dysfunctional organization. Like every mistake I think an organization makes, like the banner, like, hey, before you make a decision, ask yourself, is this good for the company? Like,
it's so funny you should ask that. I haven't, but because of our portfolio, we have I teach most in our executive program, so there are executives in the programs who would remember Office Space, just given
yeah,
the timing.
yes,
But I do think those examples are evergreen, kind of the illustration of, in a different way, kind of the norms of corporate life that rob employees of an enjoyable experience.
yes.
In some ways, we're describing, what the risk might be, right, with technology. But I will share another example. The Office also appears to be one from a media or television perspective that has a lot of these
Oh my
lasting
gosh,
lessons in the
totally.
workplace. So
I
those
love
are
that.
two might stick with us for some time, and I'm happy with it, as
I
you
love
are.
it. I don't think you can make either of those shows ever again, but
Yeah.
like yeah, I can't talk right now. I got to talk to the Bobs. I can imagine the consultants come in and, what do you say you do here? I was like, yeah, there's a lot of that.
Well, it is a callback to my days at Towers as the external consultants and the kind of the interface, exaggerated, but I will say, yeah, good image, right, and illustration of where that cannot go well, but good
Yeah.
reminder.
I mean, yeah, I forget the name of the writer, but they did Silicon Valley too, that TV show. And like that was spot on too. That was pretty amazing. That's great. Great way to end it. So we did about an hour, my friend.
Wow.
Thank you. Yes.
Hey, thank you for the opportunity. As I mentioned, any extra time I get with my buddy, long time, I mean, 1997, trying to remember those days, but
Yeah.
it's a good flashback, and great to be with you anytime, Nick.
Just put me on the corner three, Kevin. You know I'm only like 5% out there, but like I'm just gonna be there if you need me. And like maybe a pick and roll.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know. Whatever you
hey, you play hard, you run the lane, and you show a lot of effort. Uh,
I think I frustrated you with my alley oop because like okay, Kevin can actually dunk, but like I I can't pass the ball where he needs it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, the degrees of freedom on the alley oop that will work on the other end may say something about my athleticism as much as the
No,
alley oop, but nonetheless.
I think the service was pretty bad. So Kevin, tell them about your consulting. How can people find you? Maybe your website, just reaching out, people contact. I don't think you'll get a deluge of business from here, but I would love to prop up. The paper will be in the show notes. All your social media handles, your LinkedIn, but like, how can people reach out and find you?
Yeah, no, appreciate the opportunity. Groves Consulting Group is the firm. As Nick mentioned in the earlier part of the conversation, we do mostly executive development, succession planning, targeted management team training, strategic planning facilitation. Can reach us at grovesconsultinggroup.com. My email address, kevin@grovesconsultinggroup.com, or any research, some of which was referenced today on my faculty page at Pepperdine University Grazie Business School. Just look up pepperdine.edu. That work's posted there, or just reach out to me. Happy to share any research or white papers that we produce that may be helpful to anyone.
Awesome. So not
Yeah.
only are you one of the smartest guys I know, but you're also, I said at the beginning, you're one of my dearest friends. And I am so grateful to have you on here. Great human being, dad, CEO of his own consulting, professor. Like he's done it all. So I hope you will check out Dr. Kevin Groves. Thank you for the time, my brother.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thank you, Nick. Really kind and great to see you. And can't wait to see you in person soon, my friend.
Yeah, we're going to be out there in California soon.
Good.
Love it.
Good.